Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Recording 7, Chapter 13, Return to Me. In this passage, we reach a sentence that on first reading sounds very strange. O Allah, return to me so that I will not disobey you ever again. The world over, teachers of ethics, psychologists, anthropologists, and social reformers are constantly searching for ways to encourage people to act better and to avoid behavior that is harmful to themselves and others. All legislation, all prisons, all police forces, and indeed all human customs and traditions are predicted on trying to stop people from doing bad things. Do not steal, do not hurt others, and do not shame others, do not be jealous, do not be deceptive or malicious. All of these bad things are called masiyah. Sometimes it is translated as disobedience, but as you can see, it has a broader meaning. Masiyah has the same root of isyan. If, for example, a person is walking on the road and someone else blocks their path and refuses to let them pass, or one country usurps the territory of another, this is considered isyan. Whenever our base, lower instincts block our higher levels, this is considered masiyah. For example, when a moment of anger comes in the way of our decision to live in peace and harmony, or when a moment of temptation comes in the way of our intention to be loyal, in these moments, God is inviting us to take the higher path, to let go of that jealousy and anger. If we choose not to listen and opt instead to follow our lower instincts, then we have disobeyed God. As we have previously discussed, we are only really harming and sinning against ourselves. God is not harmed here. He just does not want us to hurt ourselves. This is what the teachers of ethics and spirituality are trying to help us master: how not to sin and how to overcome our shortcomings. Despite all the help we get, too many of us are still floundering, even those who know the theory. You might, for example, see the same people who run workshops on how to infuse your life with peace and mindfulness themselves end up stressing over the logistic details of said workshops. Is there then no hope? Imam says, on the contrary, there is. I find this phrase of the Du'a so profound that it has become one of my regular go-to prayers. Imam says, O Allah, return to me so that I will not disobey you ever again. Imam says that for us to stop sinning and making mistakes, we need God to return to us. But what does that mean? Has God ever left the Imam is now asking him to return? Of course not. God has not gone anywhere. Rather, we have lost him. Imagine you are a child who asks your parents to take you to your favorite shop. The shop is huge and crowded. They tell you to avoid getting lost. You must not let go of them. However, you become distracted by the toys and suddenly you realize that you have indeed lost them. They have not really gone anywhere. They are probably only a few meters away, but from your perspective, that is huge, and you become worried. You need them back. After what seems like an eternity, your parents come to you, put their hands on your shoulder and say, "Don't worry, we're here." This is what Imam means by the phrase, "return to me." He is asking God to show himself to us. I have lost you. I know you are here. I know that you have never disappeared. I know that wherever I go, you will be with me. The world, though, is very busy. I cannot seem to find you. I have lost myself, and I have also lost you. If you come back, I will find you, and find myself. As soon as I feel your presence, I will be fine again. As a child, when we felt our parents gone, we were incredibly scared. In our panic, we might have screamed or cried. The moment they were back, everything was fine once again. Imam says the same is true of us and God. When we do not feel God's presence with us, we become scared. In the ensuing panic, we act out. We become insecure, jealous, or angry. But the moment we feel His presence again, we feel good. So naturally, we become good. No one needs to force us to be good. We just naturally act well because our hearts are at peace and we are no longer scared. Undoubtedly, for the friends of Allah, no fear will overwhelm them, nor will they grieve. Quran chapter 10, verse 62. When we feel God is on our side, our hearts find peace. It is indeed in the remembrance of Allah the heart finds comfort. Quran chapter 13, verse 28. We will never have peace until we rediscover God's presence. We will never manage to overcome our mistakes and bad behavior unless we feel divine peace and light. We all know how difficult growth is. Overcoming even one bad quality has proven to be impossible for many of us. The years pass and we become old, but we still have not managed to remove traits like lying, backbiting from our characters. Sometimes we make the best of intentions to change, but once again we fall back into the same negative patterns. Some of us may have bad habits that we quit every morning and fall back into every evening. Some of us may have been struggling for years to overcome our doubts and insecurities, but have still managed not to. Imam Javad says that all of this shows there is something our heart desperately needs. It is acting out because it is craving God. That is why we keep chasing the distractions of this world, and also why, the moment we gain them, we realize that they were not what we were actually looking for. Instead of redirecting our focus towards the divine, we begin to chase something else. Imam Javad says to stop the chase. You no longer need to search. What you're looking for is God, so just tell him, "O Allah, return to me. You come and find me. I have been looking for you for years, but yet I could not find you. I searched, but I could not get to you. I am tired and overwhelmed. All these bad traits and attributes that I see in myself, manifested in my actions, all remind me that you are still lost to me. You come and find me. Your soul is greater than the world." This is the story of our lives and the lives of those who have gone before and yet are yet to come. This world is not grand enough to satisfy the heart of the human being. No matter how much we gain in this life, no matter what we eat or where we live, our heart craves more. Our souls are greater than this world. The only thing that can satisfy our souls is God. So long as we do not have God, we will always act out. Sometimes we do not even know why we are acting in the way we are. On the other hand, when God comes, we are finally relieved. A moment of his presence will calm us more than 100 years of chasing this world would ever do. Of course, this does not mean that this world is intrinsically bad. Not at all. The world is a creation of God and a signpost towards him. The issue with it is that it is not vast enough for our hearts. The physical world can nourish our body, but our soul will always remain hungry. This is why we always feel that we want more. Imam Javad says that the more we want is not just more of the same. Example, a little more of this world. In actuality, we do not want more, we want it all. We want the creator of everything. As one who understands human beings, the world, and God, Imam assures us that only once God is incorporated into our lives will we finally be satisfied. Only then will the tantrums of our minds and souls come to an end. As our hearts find peace with God, everything about us will change and improve. You may have experienced this while fasting during the month of Ramadan. As you approach the moment of breaking your fast, after hours of refraining from food and drink, you may be tired and hungry, have a headache, or even feel bored. However, the moment you have the first bite, all of your problems evaporate. All is good once again. Your head feels better, your energy is replenished, and you're no longer hungry. The same is true of our soul. When we do not feel God's presence, it is as if our soul is hungry. A hungry soul, just like a hungry body, has thousands of problems. It becomes jealous, depressed, moody, spiteful, angry, and more. The moment it feels God, all of its problems evaporate. The same person who was previously jealous and insecure now feels great. The one who was rude becomes polite. The one who was anxious finds peace. This is all we needed, for God to remind us that he is there with us. If you are able to appreciate this correctly, you will see how light you suddenly feel. The backbreaking problems that were overwhelming you will suddenly become weightless. All the darkness around you will suddenly have no impact on you. You will no longer feel affected by the distractions and temptations you face. Everyone around you may lose their peace, but you will not. Everyone around you may be deceptive or rude, but you will remain trustworthy and honest. Everyone around you may be stingy or malicious, but you will remain generous and kind. If I had not seen this with my own eyes, I would not have made empty promises to you. I do not intend to waste your time or to give you false hope. This is real. Imam Javad promise is true. I have seen people who are about to give up as a result of the seemingly insurmountable challenges they faced, who have now become so strong as a result of feeling God's presence. That not only are they no longer overwhelmed by their challenges, they are so overflowing with energy and peace they are able to share it with others. All it takes is a single moment of feeling God by your side. Do not imagine that this is reserved for those who are special or those who God loves more. On the contrary, this is a possibility for every single human being. We can all have this real inner joy and peace. All we need to do is to join Imam Sajjad al-Islam in saying, "O Allah, return to me so that I will not disobey you ever again." Chapter summary. The world is constantly searching for ways to encourage good behavior and discourage harmful actions. Ethicists, psychologists, and social reformers all work towards this goal. Despite all the help available, we still struggle to overcome these shortcomings. Imam Sajjad al-Islam offers hope by saying that to stop sinning, we need God to return to us. God has not gone anywhere, but we have lost our connection with Him. The absence of feeling God's presence can leave our souls hungry and cause various problems such as jealousy, fear, moodiness, and anger. However, the moment we feel connected to God, all our problems disappear. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Chapter 14. Talk to me. We have reached one of the most beautiful phrases of the Du'a, one that you may even consider incorporating into the qunut of your daily prayers. Inspire me with goodness, good doing, and khashiyat of you throughout the day and night as long as you keep me alive, O Lord of the worlds. In this section of the Du'a, Imam Sajjad al-Islam opens the door to one of the most fascinating areas of the human experience, ilham. Unfortunately, we are not aware of how special and life-changing ilham can be. It is a miracle that we all have access to, one which can gladden our hearts and bring us peace and light. Being able to receive ilham is one of the unique characteristics of the human being. In Surah Ash-Shams, God makes 11 oaths, something He does nowhere else in the Quran. By the sun in its morning shine, and by the moon when it follows it, and by the day as it displays the sun's glory, and by the night as it conceals it, and by the sky and how He built it, and by the earth and how He spread it, and by the soul and how He formed it. Quran chapter 91, verse 17. Then, in the climax of the chapter, He explains the reason for swearing these oaths. Then He inspired the soul to know its own rebellion and piety. Quran chapter 91, verse 8. God tells us that He communicates directly with every soul. God, with all His glory and greatness, the creator of the entire universe, with all its galaxies, informs us here that He takes the time to speak to us. Ilham versus Wahi. Elsewhere in the Quran, we read about God's Wahi, revelation to the bees. And your Lord revealed to the bee, take for yourselves homes in the mountains, and in the trees, and in whatever they construct. Quran chapter 16, verse 68. Ilham, however, is unique to human beings. No other creature is at the level to receive it. It is a unique communication of light and knowledge to the human soul. It is even more special than having a spiritual vision, as sometimes portrayed in movies or books. As exceptional as they may seem, even after death, all humans will be able to witness souls. Ilham is much higher than this. Ilham is the direct transfer of knowledge and light from God to our heart. It was in this way that God revealed the Quran to the Prophet ﷺ. You, Prophet, received the Quran from one who is all-wise, all-knowing. Quran chapter 27, verse 6. This is not just the receiving of sentences and words, but also the deeper meanings behind them. There are many concepts that we know yet do not fully have faith in or act upon. For example, many of us know that God is the provider or that He is sufficient, but this knowledge does not translate into a peaceful life for us. We still worry about our sustenance, feeling that at times we lack support. Ilham, on the other hand, is the type of meaning that is transmitted directly to the soul. I have personally seen so many people who give great talks and write amazing books, such that you think that they must be a saint or prophet. However, when you scratch away the polished exterior and get to see them on a more personal level, you see that they still struggle immensely with their character. They suffer from jealousy and holding grudges against people. The small things still get to them, making them anxious. They may well talk a great game, but their knowledge does not translate into peace and light in their own lives. There is a big difference between knowing something and truly having that knowledge. Some people know the equivalent of thousands of books, but have very little. Some only know a few lines, but they have the knowledge. They live it in their lives. Those few lines are worth more than the thousands of volumes of books packed with knowledge. This is the type of knowledge and light that Ilham provides. In this phrase, Imam Sajjad is asking God to give him Ilham. In essence, he asks God to inspire his mind with the idea of performing a good action and his heart with the ability to follow through with the idea so that it actually leads to said good action. This is a very important point. Often we know what actions are good or what needs to be done, but we cannot get ourselves to do it. Alternatively, we might try to do the right thing, but our hearts are not calm. We are anxious the whole time. Imam Sajjad al-Islam is teaching us that in these times, we need to rely on God's inspiration to calm our hearts and soul. Ilham is God talking to us. We should ask God every day to talk to us, and we should not rest until He does so. In this busy world that is full of challenges, it is only when God talks to us that our hearts calm and we feel that all is well. Our soul is familiar with the voice of God, like a child who calms down upon hearing the voice of their mother. Usually, we are told to talk to God. This is a very beautiful idea. Imam Sajjad al-Islam takes it one step further and teaches us that we should also ask God to talk to us and help us to hear His voice. When He talks to us, we are ahead of the rest of the world. We find the peace that the prophets and mystics had. The busier the heart becomes, the less peace there is, and the less we feel these inspirations. The calmer and quieter our heart becomes, the more we benefit from the inspirations. Life may be busy outside, people may come and go, but in our heart we should always leave room for God. Our heart should be a sanctuary that we keep quiet in order to hear the voice of God. Khashiyat. Next, Imam Sajjad al-Islam asks God to grant his heart his khashiyat from morning to night. Inspire me with khashiyat of you, day and night for the rest of my existence. Unfortunately, khashiyat is sometimes incorrectly translated here as fear. Khashiyat is a state of being in awe of God and His greatness. We recite the phrase Allahu Akbar, God is greater, many times a day. However, when we are faced with a big problem, we do not always feel safe in the knowledge that God is greater than the problem at hand. We might know it in our minds, but to feel it in the heart is very different. Khashiyat is when God's greatness is so manifest in our hearts that all other challenges and temptations fade in comparison. There is a beautiful line by Imam Ali al-Islam in Nahj al-Balagha that describes the people who have this khashiyat. The Creator is so significant in their souls that the rest seems small in their eyes. They are so in awe of God's greatness and beauty that distractions have faded from their hearts. The most subtle but beautiful implication is made here. The distractions do not even reach their soul. God is in their soul. Everything else is only in their eyes. In this part of the dua, Imam Sajjad al-Islam is teaching us to ask God to bestow His khashiyat directly into our hearts, so that we can feel the deep meaning behind phrases such as Allahu Akbar, God is greater, or Alhamdulillah, all praise is due to God. Imagine the day when you feel God's greatness so strongly that no matter what happens, you realize He is with you and you feel so strong and supported. You are so much in awe of His beauty that no temptation can pull you away from the life you want to live. All of this is a result of countering God and witnessing Him. In the first part, we were asking God to talk to us. Here, we are asking God to show Himself to us too. If you would like to experience life in this way, maybe you can start by adding this phrase of the dua to your qunut, or maybe as a note on your wall. Even better, why not put the book down and ask God right now? God, talk to me so that my heart finds calm, and let me see You so that I feel strong. Chapter Summary. In this chapter, we learned about Ilham, which is a direct transfer of knowledge and light from God to our hearts. It is not just the receiving of words and sentences, but also the deeper meanings behind them. It is the type of knowledge that is transmitted directly to the soul, inspiring the mind to think of good actions and the heart to follow through with them. We also learned about khashiyat, which is to have such a deep sense of God's greatness that no matter what occurs, we know He is with us. We feel strong and supported, and no temptation can take us away from the life we desire to live. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Chapter 15, Your Most Precious Possession. Imam Sajjad al-Islam continues with his beautiful dua. I am hoping for the pardoning that You have promised to confer upon the one who keeps a good idea about You. As usual, the translation does not do justice to this phrase, and we need to explore it more in detail. There are two main points. The first is saf, translated here as pardoning, and the second is what results in the saf. None of this will make sense unless we know exactly what Imam Javad means by saf. So let's explain using an example. Imagine a person is looking for a job. He applies everywhere, but most places require him to have many years of experience, which he does not have. He does not have a degree from a top university either. Most places reject him, but he manages to get an interview at a startup. They interview him and see that despite his lack of experience and a good degree, he is passionate about the work and eager to learn. It is true that he is not experienced and does not hold a good degree. But at the startup, they aim to give a helping hand to those who are willing to work hard, and so they offer him a position. This is what saf means, overlooking someone's shortcomings and giving them a position based on something good about them, a position they would not be able to gain on their own merit. In this phrase, Imam Javad is implying that God has promised to do this for some people. Now we need to work out where in our lives we need this saf, and how we should live in order to qualify for it. Actions with no results. None of us are perfect. We have many shortcomings. Here, Imam is talking about shortcomings and the most important aspect of our life, our relationship with God and the resultant well-being, or lack thereof, of our heart. Some of us have been ritualistically worshipping and trying to be good people for decades, but we do not feel any growth within ourselves. Many of the promises made in the Quran for those who pray and are faithful do not seem to hold true in our lives. The Quran says that in remembering God we should find peace, that our relationship with God removes fear from our lives, and that prayer is meant to help us overcome our bad habits. Many of us do not find this to be the case. Du'as promise us strength, yet we do not find it. This is an apparent discrepancy that many in our spiritual tradition have tried to explain using a variety of metaphors and fables. I will briefly share two of these metaphors with you. The original versions are in the form of a poem. Plain text and the English translation cannot fully capture their beauty, but they are still worthy of consideration. Where is your wheat? The first story is one of a farmer who strived for many months to produce wheat. He worked long hours every day to prepare the land for seeding, and then to plant and harvest the crops when the time was right. He then toiled for days to transfer all of his produce to a warehouse. One day he went to the warehouse but saw that there was no wheat there. To his shock, he realized that a group of rats had eaten all that he had gathered. The poet then asked a question of the reader. If there are no rats in our warehouse, then where is the wheat that we have been working for all of these years? In other words, in the same way that despite toiling for a long time, the farmer was left with no wheat, because there were rats ruining his work, the poet suggests that there must be flaws within us that nullify our good deeds. Otherwise, we would have a great store of them by now. What should the farmer have done to protect his wheat? He should have realized that it was being eaten by the rats and found ways to protect his grain from the rodents and keep them away. In the same way, we also need to know what it is within us that eats away all of our good deeds. For example, the Hadith mentioned anger as one of those things that eats away at our good deeds, like the rats in the story. If I go to the mosque every day to pray on time, but at home I am rude and aggressive with my family, I am collecting light with my good actions, but then allowing my anger to destroy the light. After years of going to the mosque, one day I realized that I have not changed even a little, not realizing that losing my temper was nullifying my good deeds. Let's say that I accept I am afflicted with this problem and that there are things within me that destroy the light of my good actions. The way to fix the problem is through God. Imam Javad talks us off the Almighty's help in overlooking our shortcomings, which we will discuss shortly. First, though, let's discuss another shortcoming we suffer from that causes us to be in need of God's help and pardoning. Where is your fat? The moral of the first story was that sometimes we gain light through our actions, but then lose it through our other actions, so that we are ultimately left with none. In this story, we talk about how we cannot even gain light in the first place. There is nothing even gathered in order to store. A shepherd once noticed that even after several weeks of grazing, his sheep were not putting on any weight and gaining any fat. He watched the sheep for a long time and realized that they weren't actually grazing on the grass as they first appeared to be, but simply chewing on air. Long hours of grazing but not growing shows that there is something wrong with the way we are grazing. The story may seem trivial at first, but if you ponder on it, you will see that it is unfortunately very telling of the situation many of us find ourselves in. When it comes to religion, if acts are not done with the right understanding, they will not lead to the desired results. We will be like the sheep chewing air and wondering why we're not growing. You do not need to think too long to find examples of this. They are all around us. A good one is the Du'a that we are discussing in this book. Every year in the month of Ramadan, we are told to recite it. Some people even recite it every day. Unfortunately, many of them are just told to read it, even if they do not understand a word. Do it for the reward, they are told. They read and read, but years later it has not changed them much. Unfortunately, this concept of doing good actions for rewards have deprived a lot of people from gaining light from their own actions. I hope that after reading the commentary on the phrases, you appreciate for yourself how much knowledge and beauty are stored in the lines of this dua. Do you think you would have gained these gifts if you had just read the dua without any reflection? It makes a massive difference when we take something seriously and do it with the correct knowledge, as opposed to just reading something for the sake of it. The same is true of almost any act in religion. The daily prayers are another example of something that most people are told to just perform without really knowing why. Why am I saying these phrases so many times every day? What do they really mean? By meaning, I am not simply referring to the translation. As you have seen thus far in this book, translations are often very limited and do not at all explain what the words actually mean. Salah and how powerful it can be is inshallah a topic we can examine in the future in another book. For now, let's return to our discussion. From the first story, we learned that it is possible to gain it and then lose our light. And in the second, we learned that sometimes we gain no light in the first place. In both cases, we need God to help us and make up for our lack of end product. We need God's saf, but how can we gain it? Optimism in God. To explain saf, we used the analogy of a job hunter who did not have experience or a good degree. Those were his shortcomings, and they resulted in many companies refusing to hire him. The startup saw his passion and willingness to learn and overlooked everything else. In this phrase, Imam is saying that God is prepared to do the same for us. I am hoping for the pardoning that you have promised to confer upon the one who keeps a good idea about you. In fact, God has promised that He will overlook our shortcomings if we only bring one thing to the table. In our example, the person had the willingness to learn. What quality should we have so that God does saf for us? Imam tells us that the key is Hasan al-Zan bi Allah, a good and positive view of God. In other words, Imam says that if you trust that God is kind and will overlook your shortcomings, then He will indeed do that for you. Have a positive view of God. Have hope in His kindness. Imam this beautiful individual, says to God that his only capital is his hope in God. He turns to God with nothing but this hope in Him. Imam knows that he is not qualified, that he has shortcomings in front of God, but he also knows that God is the source of all good, life, knowledge, power, perfection, generosity, and kindness. Imam does not advocate we present our prayers or good deeds to God. Whatever we do is limited and full of flaws. Rather, he says that the most precious tool he has is that he has found God to be forgiving and generous. This is such a profound idea. There is a beautiful hadith from Imam Islam in which he says, "Have a positive and optimistic opinion of God, for whoever has a favorable opinion of God will realize that God is indeed like their opinion." Don't let anyone take away your hope. We should hold on tightly to our hope in God and reject anyone who tries to take this hope away from us. It is precious. Some of those who attempt to extinguish our hope may do so in the name of religion. They may tell us that we have done so much wrong that God does not love us, or that even though God is merciful, He also has wrath and will punish us. Do not listen to them. Even if it is a religious scholar with the best of intentions, do not let them take your hope away from you. We do not own anything more precious. Run to God. Even if you have an ocean of shortcomings and mistakes and are worried about what is going to happen, Imam has an answer. In this phrase, he utters to God, "I run away from you, to you." A dear friend once shared a story which I think explains this line quite beautifully. He said that once, when he was very young, he had broken something in the house. He could not stop thinking about it. He was worried both that the item might never be fixed, and also that he might be in trouble when his father found out. Those few hours felt like a lifetime to him. At some point, he realized that it was getting too much. So he decided to rip the metaphorical plaster off and just go and tell his parents. He ran to his father and told him everything. To his shock, not only did his father not get angry, he actually calmed his son down and then went on to fix the broken item. Over 20 years later, my friend still remembers the beat of that moment. He thought that he was in trouble, so he ran to his father, only to realize that not only was there no trouble, his father was ready to help. This is what Imam wants us to do with God. Run to Him. Trust hope. Sometimes your hope in God may be extinguished by another group of people, those who do not believe in God. Who said there is even a God who can help you? Even if there is a God, who said He cares about you? Sometimes an inner voice inside your head may say similar things. How do I know God loves me? What if God isn't as nice as we imagine? If you had had similar thoughts, I understand. I only ask that in those times of darkness and desperation, you keep reminding yourself of the words of Imam and hold on to your hope as tightly as you can. From your current station in life all the way till the hereafter, there are the other realms we will traverse. If you have this hope in God and a good image of Him in your heart, if you know God to be loving and caring, you will be fine. You will be safe. In the Du'a Abu Hamza, Imam Ali says the only capital we have as human beings is our hope in God. Have mercy on the one whose only capital is hope. Hope in God is the sole capital of humanity. Anyone in any uniform, be it religious, scientific, or any other uniform, who wanted to take your positive view of God away from you, know that they are dealing you a death blow. Whether they know it or not, they have fallen into the hands of the devil. Whenever in your life you feel like your heart is assured of God's presence and love, be sure things will end well. Despite all the troubles, storms, and challenges, if you retain a determined feeling in your heart that God has your back, know that your story will end well. As long as a person has hope in their heart, they are alive and safe, can still grow, and can still be saved. If you're teetering on the brink and do not know if you can fully trust the sentiment, take the leap of faith now. Let your heart choose hope. Trust Imam Imam Ali, and all those illuminous personalities through history who told you that God has your back. Trust God's love for you, choose to have a good view of Him, and choose hope. There will not be a single person on the Day of Judgment who will feel that their hope in God was misplaced. Not a single person who had hope in God will be disappointed. He has guaranteed it. He is the savior of anyone who has hope. Whatever anyone tells you about God, choose to believe in something even better. God is always better than even our best view of Him. Some speak about God and our relationship with Him in a way that makes us feel defensive in front of God, or even worse, makes us want to fight with God. The only being in existence who has no quarrel with us and who never wishes anything for us other than good is God. Even those people who fight with God now or have given up believing in Him will realize the moment they meet the real God, rather than one they themselves have created in their minds, that they have no issue with Him. A teacher narrated to me that he was once in the company of a great spiritual master. A young man came forward and said that he had memorized the Quran but still did not believe in God. He did not accept that the God he imagined could exist. "Why do you not believe in God?" the spiritual master asked. The young man responded, "He is cruel." He was expecting to get a defensive response from the spiritual master. To his surprise, the scholar replied, "I do not believe in such a cruel God either." The young man could not believe what he was hearing. The great man continued, "The God I believe in is not cruel. He is so beautiful that if you knew Him, you couldn't not like Him. If you have a God that can be rejected, it means it was never the real God from the start. It was just an idea in your mind." One of the Persian poets likens the situation to that of Zulaikha in the story of Prophet Yusuf. After she had fallen in love with Prophet Yusuf's beauty and her infatuation became common knowledge, people started condemning her and judging her for her weakness. The women of high society began to look down on her, and so she decided to show them what she had seen in Prophet Yusuf. She was certain that if they saw him, their reaction would also be the same. She invited them over to her palace and commanded the Prophet Yusuf to appear in front of them. The ladies were served fruit, which they were feasting on when Prophet Yusuf walked in. The Quran details their reaction. When she heard their malicious talk, she prepared a banquet and sent for them, giving each of them a knife. She said to Joseph, "Come out and show yourself to them." And when the women saw him, they were stunned by his beauty and cut their hands, exclaiming, "Great God, he cannot be mortal. He must be a precious angel." Quran chapter 12, verse 31. They were so mesmerized by the beauty of Yusuf that they had ended up becoming distracted and cutting their hands with the knives they were using to eat fruit. Zulaykha thus showed them that they had no right to judge her. What is the relevance of the story to our discussion about hope in God and His beauty? Many of us are to Imam Sajjad what Zulaykha's peers were to her. We cannot understand why Imam loves God so much or why he has so much hope in Him. We might find it strange. How can he think God is so beautiful when life is so difficult? Imam's response would be that all we need is a single glance at God's beauty and love, one moment of feeling His presence, and we too will not be able to stop ourselves falling in love with Him. Life would taste so differently. We would experience the happiness more than the difficulty. The Quran mentions the story of a man who went to his people to tell them about God. They did not accept his words and instead killed him. Once he died and moved to the next world, he was able to see all the good things that he had believed about God. The Quran says that at that point, his main wish was for his people to know how loving and forgiving God was. "I wish my people could know how my Lord has forgiven me and honored me." Quran chapter 36, verse 27. It is such a powerful story. Even though his people had killed him, he still cared for them and wished they could know how beautiful and merciful God was, because this knowledge would really help them in their lives. This is what every single prophet and messenger was sent for, to tell or remind us human beings that God is beautiful, forgiving, and loving. Anyone, no matter their intention, who makes you feel otherwise is going against the divine mission, and also against your nature. Deep down, we are all in love with God. I remember when I initially started preaching, I would tell people to try and fall in love with God. Then I realized that was not necessary. Everyone already loves God, we just do not know it. Every time you saw a beautiful flower and admired its beauty, you were witnessing and loving God's beauty. Whenever anyone showed you love, made you feel appreciated or hugged you, and you felt a warmth in your heart, the love they showed you was actually God's love for you, and the warmth you felt was actually your reciprocal love for Him. If you initially find this difficult to accept, it is completely understandable. There is no need to worry. The Prophet ﷺ promised that in every person's life, there will come a moment where they will get a glimpse of this. In your life, there will be a breeze of mercy. When it comes, hold on to it, and do not turn your back on it. Just like a breeze of fresh air that gives us joy and relief on a hot day, the Prophet ﷺ says that in the middle of all the difficult and busy days of our lives, there will be a moment in life when we suddenly feel God's presence and love. This is when we realize that life is more than just work, sleep, and our daily routine. It will all start to make sense to us, and we will realize that all we ever wanted was to experience the sweetness of God's presence. God is not a third party who will be sitting on His throne on the day of resurrection, ready to judge us. Rather, He is a beautiful and caring presence, involved and there with us in the trenches from the very beginning. We do not need to reach Him. He is already with us. We just need to learn to incorporate Him into our lives and live with Him. Imam Sajjad says the most important necessity in order for this to happen is to have a positive view and understanding of God. God is beautiful, and He loves you. Chapter Summary. In this chapter, we learn that despite our efforts to be faithful in worship, some of us do not feel any growth or experience the promised benefits of worship and faith. We have shortcomings such as anger, which nullify our good deeds. Moreover, sometimes we do not perform good deeds with the correct understanding. However, Imam Sajjad taught us that God has saf, which means He can overlook all of our shortcomings, and the key to qualifying for God's saf is to have hope in Him. This hope is the sole capital of humanity. As long as we hold on to our hope in God, we can still grow, be saved, and ultimately have a positive ending to our story.